Okay, let's get started. So welcome as usual. If you have any questions that pop up, whether it's related to our topics or on a completely unrelated topic, please use your chat function to send it over to us, and then we'll get you a response back as quickly as we can. I took out our status slide that we've seen forever on these weekly sessions because there's really no change in our status. We're live, we're moving forward, and we're really just in our day-to-day operational mode. So if there is anything new on status, I will be sure to update you. But I did get a request to go through the appendices, and I actually thought it was an excellent request. So this morning we're going to go through a little bit of detail on each of the appendices that are out there, and so you can become, more familiar. There may be one or two of these that you use all the time, and there may be some of them that you don't, or maybe you're not using them at all. So this will just give you an opportunity to see what's out there in the appendices. I've included a link at the bottom, so you can just use this link to go out to the trainer support website. Appendices are the first thing in our resource list, so it's easy to find. But if you need that reference, you can find it here in the PowerPoint from today. Okay, so Appendix A is probably our simplest but maybe most important appendix. I'm not sure. Appendix A is simply an explanation of the units of measure that reside within BidBuy. The one thing that's important to know about the units of measure is that they do correlate with SAP. So, they are a unit of measure that both BidBuy system and SAP understand and recognize. So if you have a question, for example, over here on the M's, M and MI and ML, the meter, the mile, and the milliliter, and then the MM, which is milliliter and then millimeter. So it could be really easy when you're working within the BidBuy system to, pick ML for mile, but you're really then specifying a millimeter, or a milliliter. So make sure that, everyone that you're training and talking to is familiar with this. Another one, I think, a very commonly used unit of measure in the system is case. The abbreviation for that happens to be CV. Why it's CV, I'm not exactly sure. But, so they're not always as intuitive as you might think they are, but these are standard recognized abbreviations. And these, would work within our system as well as other systems that use standard abbreviations for measurements. So that is our first appendix, and it's very helpful. We also have the Appendix B, and I think there's mixed feelings about our Appendix B. I think many love and appreciate it and rely on it. I think there's others that find it a bit complex and confusing. So essentially, I think the most important thing to know about our Appendix B is that it is there as a basic guide. So the intended use for this is not that every single thing that's identified on the Appendix B is an absolute requirement within BidBuy, but it is a guide for you to think about what might be required within BidBuy. These are what we would anticipate on a standard average type procurement, what may very well be required, but you and those of you that, those that you're training that work within BidBuy need to make those determinations individually. In addition to that, these are our general statewide recommendations within each individual agency. There's a strong likelihood that you have additional documents or additional requirements that you're going to need to consider adding as an attachment with it or a form within BidBuy. So this is our general basic guide. And as with everything, it's fluid, so we update this, we make changes to this. Sometimes, someone who's on this call will, send me a note and say, hey, I don't think this is correct, or can you, add this? So it's, as with all of our documents and all of our forms, always make sure that you're working off the latest, greatest, go out. I know it's easier to just print one and stick it in a folder and pull it open, but truly the best way and the most accurate way to work with these resources is to get them live so that you have the latest, greatest. And then in terms of this particular appendix and how to read it and how to work with it, I'll just go through that real quickly. So you start here with the BidBuy document that this particular document would be, this attachment document name would be related to. So I've done a brief snapshot here, but if I had the full document, you'd see that we have things organized. You know, is it a document we use at the bid stage? Is it a document that's used at the rec stage? Is it a document that's used at the PO stage? So it identifies where in the process within BidBuy you might be utilizing this particular document. So that's what we identify here in the first column. So it's real easy for you to go and say, I'm doing a requisition. Let me see all the documents related to the procurement I'm doing that I might consider using. The next column is the owner of the document. That's not real helpful on a day-to-day basis, but it is helpful to us. Is it a CMS document? Is this often an agency document? Is this a specific document for somebody else? So we've indicated on here who might be the owner of that document. The next thing is the document name. So in this particular instance, let's look at the solicitation document for an RFP. It's the blank version. So that should give you an idea of what that particular document is. And then if we go over to the next column, the type of document it is. So is it an attachment or is it a form? Those are basically the two types of documents. As you know, for most of our documents that we have in our BidBuy system as forms, we also have them available as an attachment. So we have this one down here that indicates that it's a form and it's also available as an attachment. So that's the type of document. Are you going to be looking for something that you're attaching? Are you going to be finding a form within the system? And then this will tell you the location of that particular document. So if you wanted to go out and access it, where would you find that particular document? Chances are for the documents that users will be using on a regular basis, they're going to have those bookmarked or have ongoing access to it. This is just here for a quick reference. And then we have a version number. If there's a version number available to us, we've added that. We work to keep that up to date as versions change. So there may be updated version numbers. The next two boxes are going to be two columns are going to be really helpful as you're working with a particular document in the system. These, again, are our general guidelines. Is a document going to be kept as confidential, or are you going to show it to the vendor? And when you're showing something to the vendor, which version are you going to be showing? You're going to be showing a completed version, a blank version, that kind of thing. So that is the general guidance in terms of the boxes that should be checked when using a particular document. But again, these are decisions that you're also going to want to make on a case-by-case basis as it is specific to your particular procurement that is being worked on. And then here's really the heart of what is within the Appendix B. And within the Appendix B, you'll see back to the one I've been going through, which is the RFP solicitation document. And you'll see indicated here that of all of the potential procurement types we have on the appendix, this is going to be used in the event that you are doing an RFP type of procurement. So that's what those columns all identify. If you work from left to right, this is an IFB, this is an RFP, RFI leasing, emergency and emergency extension, sole source, state use, leases and concessions, QBS, a straight-up RFI, a small purchase, a demand rec, a release off of a master, a change order, a renewal, and an up piggyback, as well as an up release off master contract. So that's what those columns signify. So if you're looking at it from this side, at the bid stage, that's one way of looking at the organization of the information. Another way of looking at how the information is organized is to go in and say, oh, okay, I'm doing an RFP. And you can go completely down the column of Appendix B and say, okay, on an RFP, I'm likely to need the solicitation document. I may need this agency veterans form. I may need a BEP exemption decision memo. I may need goal setting and so forth. As you go through the column, that is all the potential documents that we've identified that are likely to be needed or may be needed on your procurement. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me see if I have any questions up here. Okay, so someone said, we have a unit of measure in SAP that's not in BidBuy. Should we email state user? Absolutely. Whenever you see anything along those lines, I see something here, I don't see it there, why is that the case? Absolutely, send it over to state user and we'll look into it and get back to you. So that would be greatly appreciated if there is a difference. And someone says, will it create interface errors if we pick EA for each in BidBuy, but use a material master that SAP will recognize RL as the corresponding unit of measure? I believe that you do need your units of measure in BidBuy to match your material master units of measure. If anyone is on this call and has a different answer, please let me know. But I do believe those two units of measure are expected to match and should match. And then someone had a question about small business set aside for an IFB or RFP. So why you might need a small business set aside waiver. So you could be doing an IFB and going out and doing a solicitation on an IFB or RFP that falls under the small purchase threshold, and you might need to attach that waiver in the event that you are getting a waiver and you're doing a different kind of solicitation for a small purchase. So hopefully that explains why you might need the small business set-aside waiver when you are doing an IFB or RFP. Okay, so that's Appendix B. I think that's probably the one that is a little more confusing, but again, hopefully very helpful and informative. And if you, again, have recommendations, comments, questions, please send them over. This next appendix that we have is Appendix C. Appendix C is an explanation of the custom columns within BidBuy. So as you know, there are standard fields that are located throughout the BidBuy system, and then we have those fields that were added by the state that are referred to within the BidBuy system as a custom column, or best to think of it, just as a custom field that the state has specified. And because there are a lot of custom columns that require very specific information in the system, this is an explanation of what the custom column labels or names are and what the description of that column is. So if you're ever working within the system and you're looking at the old original contract number field, for example, and wanted to know, what can I put in there? Can I put anything I want in there? How should I put it in there? So this gives you an explanation of what is anticipated in that custom column. So, additional NIGP codes, what does that field do? Federal funds, will a grant funding source be used? So, should you ever have a specific question about one of those fields, you can pull up that custom column, and then you're going to be confident that you're using it properly and putting in the right information. So I think the Appendix C is fairly straightforward and fairly easy to use. Appendix D, we have an accounting manual. The reason we have this accounting manual is originally we were going to use the accounting system one way, and then we changed and made it much simpler so that all you're basically doing is picking your special procurement type. And this is just a short and sweet manual. If anyone wants further details on how they can or cannot use the fields on the accounting tab, what they should do to it, they can go ahead and read through this. As you can see from the little image that I grabbed out of the manual, it talks about the difference between putting in accounting at the header level or putting in accounting at the item sub-tab, and what that does and what that means and what you have to do in those particular instances. So just so we had, one place that you could find accounting information that is located in the Appendix D. Okay, some of the Appendix D is done on the BidBuy reference page. I thought when I looked there, I saw it there, but I'll take a look again and see if it's missing. If it's missing, we'll get it posted out. And then Appendix E. And let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you. Appendix E is a document that we put together when there were questions. There were agencies saying, well, can you tell me exactly who does which step, and where do we come in and where does the agency come in? And so this is a summary of who does what when. That's who does what when, basically, is what we should call it. And it really works similarly to the Appendix B, where you look across the top to see what action's being taken, and you look down the left side in this particular case, and you will see a particular procurement type. So the first one on the list is the IFB, and you'll see here that for an IFB, it indicates that the agency submits the rec. The agency would cancel a rec, and always the reminder, if you're canceling something, make sure you're following the appropriate process. An agency will do the process to convert a rec. The SPO will send the bid. Canceling bid is done by the SPO, and truly the agency works together, but ultimately the action being taken is taken by the SPO. Applying a bid amendment is done by an SPO. Converting a bid is done by the agency. Notifying the PPB is done by the SPO. And then sending the purchase order, SPO, and applying a change order is done by the agency. And so hopefully, that's helpful to you when you're explaining, knowing when you're supposed to take action, when someone else is supposed to take action within the system. And so we've gone through, and if you just, again, read it across the rows and down the columns, you should be able to find the answers that you're looking for. Okay, Appendix C. So that's your chart of your actions in case you have any questions about who's doing what. Okay, so that is Appendix A through E. It was sort of a quick review, but if you have any questions about any of those, please let me know. And like I said, and if you have any recommendations or comments, send that over to State User. The other thing that we wanted to cover this morning is for our joint purchasing master contract, release off those masters. So I know that there has been some confusion out there, and I think that some of that confusion may have led to some delays in doing these releases off of these joint purchasing master contracts. And so we just wanted to go through that with everyone this morning. So you have this recording later as a reference. You may not be releasing off of those very often. So by the time you get around to doing one, 6 months from now, you'll hope you remember some of what I said, or that we even talked about it, but the recording will be available, so you'll be able to go back and reference it. And, it's different than the way you used to do these kinds of things, so that's one of the reasons why I think, there's been a little confusion, but hopefully this morning we can go through and make it a little clearer for you. In addition to the recording of this session, there's also a full recording out there in our videos on the release off of multiple award contracts and that whole process. So you can also access that if you want the full in-depth. This is the one that you'd look at if you want just a quick refresher. So the first thing I have here for you is a link out to the up page, and this is where you're going to find various documents related to joint purchasing master contracts as well as statewide masters and anything. This is the location that you will find guidance and information related to UP. We also have resources available out on the trainer support website that are specifically under the UP heading, and you can find those resources also, but this is the page that's dedicated specifically to all things UP. And so this is the location on the trainer support website. When you go into the training resources area, you'll see it's labeled the Unified Procurement Program. This is where we keep our documents, And in particular today, we're going to talk about that release off of a multiple award master contract. So that's the document that we have, that's the job aid. In our video section of the trainer support website, we also have a video, and that was what I was just describing, that full-length deep dive session on how to do releases off of a multiple award contract. And so the job aid looks like this, and starts out and gives you some basic instructions on what to do in advance, and then starts taking you through step-by-step the process. All of you are familiar with our job aids. I know those are our most popular documents. So, but that is, the job aid that's available specifically for the multiple award contracts. It could be very easy to start doing, an up release and to go out and just grab, the release job aid and just do a release off of a master contract. And I think that's, where some of the questions have come from. When doing anything that's a joint purchase that's being conducted through the UP program, you do want to make sure that you're getting the right document for the UP program. So this is released off of a multiple award contract. So just as a quick refresher, hit the key points of the release off of the multiple award contract. Our acronym that we use for, I always do that. Our acronym is ROMAC, that's a release off of multiple award contract. And when you're getting ready to do one of these, they're a little more complex than the average master contract that's out there, because you're dealing with multiple awardees. And so you have to do the competitive part of your solicitation before you can go out and just do a release. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do when you're doing one of these is to go out and review the specific CPO notice for that procurement. That is going to give you an in-depth explanation of that particular procurement. And that's what I showed you was located out on the UP website. So that's where you're going to find those CPO notices. The next step that you're going to do after you've reviewed that and you understand that particular multiple award contract, then you will complete and distribute the request for quote document to the contract holders. So mailing machines is one of those contracts. There are multiple vendors who have received an award off of that contract. And so you're going to, for the particular procurement that you're doing, reach out to all the vendors who are eligible to participate and ask them for a quote, because you want to give this contract to the lowest price vendor. And lowest price includes not only the actual dollar amount for whatever it is that you're purchasing, but it's really the total value or the life cycle cost for that particular procurement can be taken into consideration when you are doing one of these requests for quotes and then selecting your vendor. So you would complete and you just distribute your requests for quote, you get all of those responses back, you do your evaluation, life cycle cost, actual cost, and the next thing you're going to do is then complete, once you have that done, complete your request to release off of a multiple award contract. You would complete that document, and then you would begin creating your requisition. So once you start creating your requisition, the key thing to know here, and that's why it's in bold, and this is one of the steps that has not necessarily happened for a couple of circumstances, is you need to add your SPO to the approval path on this requisition. So generally speaking, when you're doing requisitions, SPOs are not on requisitions. But this is different because the SPO is actually going to then reach out on your behalf to UP staff to review and ensure that all the steps that needed to be done, including getting those quotes and then doing your analysis and selecting your vendor. That's why you're adding the SPO here. Your SPO will help with your UP review and then give you that final approval as it relates to the UP requirements for this particular procurement. So once you do that and you have the SPO approval, then you'll submit it off for your final approval, and then after approval, your purchase order will send to your vendor. So that's the quick overview of the releases off of the multiple award contracts. And there's a handful of those right now, maybe 2 handfuls of those that are out there. But, I think we'll see more of those in the future. So it is important that you know where your resources are. And if you have any questions, as always with everything, reach out to your SPO. So let me see if there's any questions. No, I don't see any questions on that. So other than that, those were our 2 main new pieces of information I wanted to go through today, or not new pieces of information, but sort of refreshers and reviews and items that I wanted to point out for you. Everything else pretty much remains the same. We have our end user support process, seems to continue to work well, but always very important to make sure that you're working with your end users, and then trainers, APOs, SPOs are the ones that are reaching out and communicating with the help desk. So please continue to do that. As always, continue to review your business processes and, update your approval paths. I cannot stress, importantly enough, the last item on this list in terms of agency readiness, which is ensuring that you have all of your registrations up to date and you have all of your deactivations up to date. So, I've made recommendations that you work with HR so that HR actually has some responsibility in terms of managing that, like they do all the other things, but also make sure that, that is being kept up to date. That will, almost certainly be an audit finding if you are not keeping those up to date. So please do that and make sure that only people who are permitted to have access in the system do have access to the system. And then, again, here's the 3 help desks. We do continue to get some questions about, which help desk, and sort of a common question is related to, what if we have a vendor and they submitted a bid but they're not registered in the system? That is always a question that gets sent over to the vendor help desk. They are well equipped to assist you with that, and we'll give you the guidance and instructions on what to do in those cases and assist you in the event that you're not successful. Everything else, for the most part, comes to state user, and then there's the ERP information and websites for you. BidBuy forms. So should you be looking for a form in BidBuy and you're not able to utilize the one in BidBuy, the alternatives are located out here. Upcoming training, it seems to always be there, BEP process training. I think we'll have more updates for additional training programs coming in the future, but as of right now, we still have that out, and it is still definitely a priority, and we're still continuing to working on finalizing that training for you. And that's it. So that covers everything that I have today. Are there any questions? I will keep the line open to see if anything else comes through. And we do have a question. So there was a question about the ITRP IFB. Actually, that's really interesting. That's a really good question. And in terms of the templates, and that actually came up with another group yesterday, and the answer is yes. We have some folks working on seeing if we can make the ITRP IFB templates available. And for those of you who are wondering what the heck the ITRP IFB template is, that is a IT program that is conducted through and in collaboration with Do It. And ITRP is essentially a process by which IT vendors are pre-qualified prior to being able to respond to a solicitation. Don't quote me on that, but that's my basic understanding of it. And yes, we are working on seeing if we can get those templates brought forward so everyone can have access to them. So good question. So I'll leave it open for another minute or so and see if we have any other questions this week. Okay, so I think that's it. I don't see anything else. As usual, in the next couple of weeks before our next session, send anything else that you need over to State User, and thank you very much for attending.